Where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our wetter wells? A lot of W's in that thing at the end. Okay. Hi, this is Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. I'm one of your hosts, a perfect gentleman they call Michael Swaim, and with me is a crazy schmeg who eats schlanger.
That's true.
Introduce yourself.
That's so true about me. I'm Abe Epperson. I'm a tiny gentleman as well. Well, you said you're a perfect gentleman. I'm a tiny gentleman.
That's right. And we have another diminutive gentleman with us. Just could fit in your pocket and so polite.
Just little
very special guest. Please introduce yourself, special guest.
Hi, I am John Borba. I only eat Schlinger on religious holidays, and I am a producer of AAA video games at a first-party studio known for making games about Norse mythology and fungal zombie apocalypses.
Fungal.
I like that.
Zombie. Oh, that one. Okay. Moving on. Thanks for being here, Borbs. And
no problem.
A perfect, I think, topic for you, as people will soon come to find out. We're talking Mad Max Fury Road 2015s. It's been on the list for a long time. Excited to finally talk about it. Abe, I don't think this was not. We owe no one a shout out, right? This one's just for us. One for them, one for us.
This one's for us, baby.
Okay, great. Yeah, George Miller's return to the screen after, I don't know, long time. Fury Road, and we usually start things off because we have our guest involved in the decision-making process by asking, Borb, what's your relationship to Mad Max Fury Road, the Mad Max franchise, and what led you to pick that movie over all the other movies that you could have potentially picked?
So Mad Max is a film that I kind of went in blind, and I'm a huge metalhead. And honestly, just like the marketing campaign was enough for me to be like, yeah, all right, let's watch some gonzo ass movie. And I think coming off of, Batman and stuff like that, I was really interested in seeing Tom Hardy play a role that I thought was going to be less like Bane than it was. But I'm a big fan of the imagery, and I had not seen the original, and I don't know that I have still seen the original Mad Max films.
Oh, I definitely did, but it's been forever. Especially, I don't tend to revisit Mel Gibson stuff, but I definitely saw him growing up because of the world building. Like, my dad was very into sci-fi and world building stuff, and that's where I got it from. But aware of the original, but I think for most people our age and younger, it may as well have been the first Mad Max movie in many ways. I don't know a lot of people who are precious about the continuity of Mad Max, but a crazy reintroduction to the world and the character, obviously new actors in the roles, et cetera, et cetera. I remember this blew me away the first time I saw it. And it's one of those movies, like, I have such a clear memory of, for some reason, random movies I was just particularly receptive to. Usually good movies with unique visuals, like Royal Tenenbaums. I didn't watch. I saw it in theaters, and then I didn't watch it for 15 years, but I could remember every scene. And similarly, I feel like, so it's 2015, so 7 years, not as long, but I haven't watched this. I've only watched it twice now, and watching it for this, I still remembered everything. Not that it's overly complex, but man, it's a very unique novel imagery that is seared into my brain forever. I have no doubt that on the day I die, I don't know that I'll actively be thinking about it, but I'll remember Mad Max Fury Road. It will be in there.
With your last breath, you'll say, Mad Max,
witness me, Furiosa. Abe, what's your Mad Max first blush
same
vibes?
deal.
Yeah.
I watched all of them. I grew up with Mad Max, and this was a welcome update, of course. It's it's my bag. You know me. I'm all about the form and style of camera and moving images. And this is just an orchestra of motion and car violence. It's amazing. I don't think we have anything like it made in the last 10 years. Definitely not in the last 10 years. Maybe not in the last 20 years. It's spectacular. I mean, we're all gushing over here.
Right.
Let's try to make an interesting podcast. How about that?
For sure. I have tons of interesting thoughts about. I think they're interesting about Mad Max. But so you were a Road Warrior guy, because I guess I can I could start with a question, which was that, first of all, recap it real quick. It's so easy. We don't usually do a full synopsis, but in this case, how can you not? In case you don't remember, there's this guy who barely talks. His name is Mad Max. And then there's Charlize Theron, who plays Furiosa, who works for Morton Joe, who is a despotic leader of the wasteland. There's other despotic leaders of the wasteland, but he's the one we care about. He has a harem of women called breeders who are kept, against their will to be impregnated by Joe and his weird offspring and like whatever cadre of ghouls he has living up in the tower, hoarding all the water in this desert wasteland, which is presumably post-apocalyptic Australia. I don't know if that's explicit, but I would assume
That's
so.
right.
And Furiosa decides to rebel against Joe and try to save the breeders by driving the war rig away from there back to the green place where she comes from. Mad Max gets enslaved by Joe's forces and ends up teaming up with Furiosa. They drive all the way there only to realize the green place doesn't exist anymore, and they decide the only thing to do is drive back, kick ass, take over the fortress, kill Morton Joe, and just live there and have the water and presumably become drunk on power and corrupt. But well, I just feel like I'm not pro Morton Joe over here, but I do think if you run the water nonstop, no one knows where that water comes from. It's got to run out eventually.
The tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, they just leave it running.
Point.
They're like, rise up, let them all eat cake, and then you got no cake left, would be my fascist argument. But anyway.
Hey, man, you got to let the spice flow.
Yeah. As I think the only negative I've ever heard about this movie from people is I do know quite a few people who were like, which is crazy to me because I'm really not. But they say I was bored by that movie because nothing happened. They drive away, they drive back. And I do think that's interesting to talk about is the exercise in minimalism and spectacle, because it kind of comes off to me watching it through a critical lens this time. It reminded me more than anything of a really good version of the Waterworld live stunt spectacular at Disneyland, which I went to not too long ago.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, where I'm like, the focus of this is the stunt work, the craftsmanship, the explosions, even the comping and the art deck and the world building, but much more than the, meaning behind it's bad to hoard water. It's bad to be like a mutant with a gold nose and giant mutated feet. Like, fuck that guy. There aren't deep messages woven into it beyond might makes right or the good rising up against the evil. But as someone who's, you mentioned it, John, you said you are a big metalhead. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, do you find metal's the kind of genre where you dive into it and you do care about a fine, isn't metal also akin to that, where it's about spectacle, craftsmanship, and virtuosity? Versus go ahead.
I think it has multiple facets, but I think in general, when people think about metal, especially for people who don't deep dive into it, a lot of it is about, the packaging and the presentation rather than the messaging. And I think one of the most amazing things to me about this movie is, without being a comic book movie, the spectacle of what's going on and the color palette of this movie really sell it as a film more than a lot of what is going on emotionally. And I think that it has, especially in the first third of this movie, some of the best world building I've ever seen in a film. But I do think that there are times, because George Miller is George Miller, that it leans so far into that over the topness that it can be a little bit jarring, and to me lose its artistic credibility in that, because of how laughably over the top it was to me. I didn't really have that feeling on first viewing, but watching it now, I feel like pushing past the initial packaging and that shock and awe and the beauty of this film on first viewing, it did lose a little bit of its steam for me. It's still fantastic, but I think that especially the last third of the movie lost a little bit for me.
I actually think, it's very simple. It's a linear story, obviously. It's just a big chase. There's a lot that isn't going on in terms of what we have come to, we recently covered Nope on this podcast. And it's like there's a lot to unpack in that. You know, this does not have complexity, although it does have themes that are very, like, I would call them basic, but
archetypal.
Yeah, monolithic is a better word. You know, it discusses humanity and like currency and survival and power and cult leadership. And it has stuff to say about all those things, and it's kind of sneaky. There's a lot that I got from the second viewing, like little things like I didn't catch the first time that they call doctors organic mechanics.
Yeah, my favorite part.
Yeah, or that this time I didn't catch, because he kind of says it just real quick, which is a lot of how the world building is done in the, you know, first third, as you mentioned, John. It's done so quickly that you like internalize this huge offer, and you're on your road to the next one, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of things going on. So it's like, I knew like Aqua-Cola, you know, and stuff like that, Guzzling, you know, like he's doing all these little world building things. But like one of my favorite ones that I caught this time is when Nux says that he was planning on going to Valhalla. He says McFeasting with the heroes of time. And I just like that, you know, little dig at consumerism.
Well, it's also it's the idea of like, remember that dragon movie where they reenact Star Wars and they pretend they came up with it, and they do Star Wars as a play for kids. It's that futuristic apocalyptic
Rain
dragon
of Fire?
Rain of Fire, thank you. Just through the use of the word McFeasting, it implies this whole reality where the people who remember McDonald's or whatever have made McDonald's legendary in the minds of the new generations who live without McDonald's. Like, there's a place you could just go and you'd get the food, and they'd have like nuggets. And like, that's where you'll go if you sacrifice yourself. You'll get to make feast with the heroes of time. I agree. It reminds me of nothing more than Clockwork Orange, honestly, which is like... was renowned at the time for throwing you into the deep end with just, this is how they talk in the future, I guess. And you have to figure it out through context clues. But it's not just the language. One I liked this time was Comma Crazies, which I didn't realize everyone was like corrupting that word to describe the half-lives, I guess they're called. And
yeah, because everyone's radiated.
Yeah,
you know?
But through those, not just words, but also through a large part through the production design, I found, speaking of like, I don't know, like when we would dissect, if we were to dissect a game like Half-Life, it's kind of the same maneuver there. There's so much wallpaper and production design and art deck that is also world building, that it truly becomes what I would call magical realism rather than, because to me, fantasy almost carries with it tropes, like the baggage of particular tropes. Oh, fantasy, you mean there will be elves there? And sci-fi kind of has this, oh, there will be lasers. And it's like, I love, my favorite is magical realism, which is like, it's just, it's weird stuff that doesn't exist that you've never seen before. And it's so rare that someone can actually present that. So I do value that skill very much. And I found that even more thought went into it than I assumed the first time. Like the fact that each pair of Half-Lives has like a lancer and a driver, and the driver is assigned by this giant Christmas tree of steering wheels that are detachable, and it's associated with a particular, like, you can figure out the social hierarchy of the post-apocalyptic universe if you care to think about it so just quickly and easily, based on the layout of the stuff they're showing you, which is very comic book like. Borba's totally right about that. Inescapable.
Well, and even just the like giant set pieces at the beginning of this movie really stress the enormous gap between the people at the top and the people at the bottom, and who has to lower themselves to be a servant of Immortan Joe. Like the entire structure of that society up on this enormous cliff, you know, lowering themselves down in these vehicles that are pieced together from a society that doesn't exist. Even looking at the rig, like it's representative of storytelling of the entire world, the vehicles that are designed in this and the way that they're constructed, looking at, you know, how the world has evolved the drummer of an army into this guitar playing demon who's strung up. Like everything is consistent and everything feels like it is emergent from the world that they developed going back, and so many questions are posed that's really what effective world building is to me, is that you give me enough things where I'm like, holy shit, how did that happen? Where did you get to that point? And just giving little hints of that is how you really, sell great world building.
Like the guitarist on first blush to me seemed like a hat on a hat. But now I actually buy it. I'm like, no, it's like, because it's almost in Magic the Gathering, you'd have goblin hordes and you'd have cards that were, goblin drummer. And it made me make the connection that I didn't make before of like, oh yeah, like a drummer boy, like a herald, like a bugler. He's like, his only job, this eyeless Voldemort freak, is to keep the Klingon battle rage going, like the Berserker frenzy going. It totally works.
This time around, I actually got a little bit more meaning from something that I didn't really pick up because I was just kind of earlier from my first viewing, like just it washed over me
Long
because
for the ride,
I wasn't. Yeah, it was along for the ride, and is also not really looking at it in context of the first 4 films, and it was just like, okay, so what's different about this? How's it actually an update? And one of the things that I found that I thought was actually pretty cool was that Miller does something in the story with names. If you look back at like Thunderdome, you look back at Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, like you get like everyone is a Master Blaster. Yes, we have Doof Warriors here, but everyone is like a name, right? There's Max, there's there's heroes. And the story is about the heroes. It's very classic in its design. It's a movie about the masses being controlled by these Immortan Joes, these Furiosas.
People eaters.
These like Greek kind of like equivalent of Greek gods. And this movie is got that because that's a part of the world building. But it's so much more than that in this movie. Names mean different things. And the fact the movie is kind of doing this thing where it's saying that power is dictated by the name. Like Morden and Furiosa and even Max initially, they are kind of cogs of the system, or I should say that Immortan isn't really a cog of the system, but the nameless characters, the people who are usually referenced as a group, like the Breeders. Nux has a name, but he's also a war boy,
and you gather some of the Breeders' names, like Splendid is one of their names, but a lot of them
they
are
become important because I think names follow, like power is followed by names. Like they're more powerful, they get names, and that's usually just true about hero myths. But this movie is about the nameless groups, like electing a person or having someone who's representing that group taking that power. And we noticed how like precious names are in this movie. If you remember, one of the biggest beats in the movie between Furiosa and Max is him just saying his name to her because she asked
Max,
earlier.
My name is Max.
And I think Joe kind of gets this, like he calls them, like you mentioned, like Splendid or Fragile, or the Dag is my favorite one.
The Dag.
And in a way that's a kind of a false identity because I think he gave them those names, but it just shows how in this universe even a name marks power, and this movie is very much about a power upset, and it's about power to the lower class, so to speak. And that is not untrue of the first movies, but it's more of Max. Max is never a main character. He's always kind of auxiliary to someone else's story.
He's the loner who gets involved begrudgingly, yeah.
And he's always the one who does like the big, usually sacrificial kind of
does the right thing.
Attempt.
Can't not.
Right? And we don't get that in this movie. He's a part of he's there for the ride. He's the main lieutenant of, this revolution. But I would argue that Nux is the protagonist because he's the one who changes over the story, right? He's the one who starts off as a zealot and then he ends up understanding, there's I realize now that human life matters. And then he slowly realizes that, oh, and sometimes there's a benefit to sharing. There's a benefit to someone who is kind to me instead of indoctrinating me into this system. He grows to, and then he determines that he needs to sacrifice himself. So it's like, it really is a different breed of Mad Max film.
I technically agree, or I mean, like, yeah, your movie mouth's all correct, because Max doesn't want to get involved, decides he does have to helps a little, but doesn't do the main, like, it's not really him that overthrows the society, it's Furiosa, and then fades into the crowd. Furiosa is like, Immortan Joe sucks, learns that she can't go home again, but really stays on the path of, okay, then fuck Immortan Joe sucks. And what's, I guess I'll say, or the reason I went, yeah, is because I think you're right that Nux is the main character, and that highlights what I actually thought was the one thing that sort of lost its luster for me this time, is I think the least buyable thing in the movie, and maybe I'm just bringing too much realism to bear, but is that a zealot raised in a fascistic cult from birth, like, it's so quick. I just don't think we explore, and it could have been so ripe and interesting.
One of your favorite movies is Brazil, dude. You know, like I feel like it's the same thing. I guess it's maybe because it's that magical realism bent, because they're so simplistic. They're little ants, basically.
I buy Jonathan Pryce chafing against the reality of his situation, I guess, more than I buy Nux seeing that breeder and just being like, Dreamweaver, and like, love has made me decide I hate my society that I loved a second ago. Only because, like, he's like, Jonathan Pryce is just trying to survive. He is a cog in the machine. Nux, like, his greatest desire is to die for Immortan Joe. It just seems quick that he goes to, like, now I will overthrow Immortan Joe and betray my whole society.
What's the saying? You work long enough in a glass factory and one day you want to pick up a hammer. I think it just it's a switch. He realized that he was being abused his whole life and he became angry.
Yeah, I don't see enough of a triggering event to outweigh the other side of that. I think I agree with Swaim on this one, but I would say that, in my opinion, I think Max has more of a turnover and more agency in this story, because, I mean, he is the one that pulls Furiosa back from the plan that she had. She offers him this alternative future, and he comes to her and says, no, this is not what you want. This is not a reality that can be sustained. You're all going to kill yourself chasing this dream, and the only option for you is to go back, continue this fight, and die or win. And I think that, you know, to me, saying Nux is the protagonist is like saying that Barley from the movie Onward is the protagonist. To me, he is a vehicle for everyone else around him to pivot, which is in a lot of ways what a protagonist is. But Furiosa, you know, she doesn't make that decision without Max. Nobody does. That the story doesn't turn over and end without Max there to be that linchpin of the story. And I don't think that she makes some of the decisions that she ultimately makes, you know, continuing on after one of the breeders goes under Immortan Joe's wheel without Max there, without the influence of seeing him as a pillar.
No, I mean, it's not clear cut. I'm just saying, like, and I'm using a very, I would probably say, outdated. I mean, I am I like film history. I like books about story. Mm-hmm. Our definition, I think, of protagonist and main characters has altered over the years.
Well, those are two different things as well, or at least the way I learned it, and it can change.
Heroes also don't need to be protagonists, but the definition I guess I'm using is who changes over the film. And that is like a definition of a protagonist. But
although that does highlight something I wanted to ask about Max, because you seem to have the previous movies in your brain a little more. Does anyone know if, because technically Max's arc, which I agree with Abe, is a very little change, but it is change, right? Is the Three Kings arc, which is he starts by thinking he's been hurt too many times. He will never put his neck out on the line again ever for anyone, even though he is at heart a good guy. And then it happens again and he goes, all right, I will. And he puts his neck on the line for the cause of good. And he keeps saying that he's haunted and he keeps seeing flashes of a particular girl. Is that his daughter or that's someone from the previous films, right? Who died that he let down?
That's Glory.
Okay.
And that's like a girl he tried to save
And just couldn't. She died. Okay.
Yeah, and some internet sleuths found that out because in Fury Road, Glory gets killed by like huge cars. Mad Max's daughter died in the same way, which is why I think Glory is so.
She was a surrogate daughter to him. Okay.
But she died by a motorcycle gang before the events of the first movie. So.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's kind of like he's going mad, and it's basically his daughter. It might as well be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do think
mixing it all up.
That's an interesting primal theme, or it's like we cover a lot of random crap on our network, John. So we recently covered the Harlan Ellison short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And I think they're interesting comparisons in that ultimately they're both a meditation on in the extremes of desperation when it's like a zero-sum game and I can survive, but it will have to be at the cost of other innocent people. It's the defiant statement that, like there's a spark of nobility in humanity that actually will rise and like show itself when you'd least expect it. Because really in this situation, right, they're so desperate, it seems like it would just fall apart and there would be no good people left. And I do think ultimately it's trying to be uplifting, and Max is an inspiring figure in the way of like the man with no name, but even a little bit more benevolent. I feel like he does feel the call to action and the call to like protect the innocent. And I think it's almost even more striking that it's against a backdrop of, no offense, Australians listening, but like, yeah, I don't even know how the fuck these people survive here. Like, look around. It looks like nothing. It's like the Matrix and you deleted everything. There's just nothing there. What's the deal with those stilt guys? It's the only piece of world building I don't understand. Explain it to me, someone.
Wait, the stilt guys? Do you mean the guys flying on?
The guys who walk on all fours and they're in like ghillie suits in the swamp area?
Fucked if I know, man.
Okay, cool.
Like, awesome.
I was wondering if there was a throwaway line that explained how they work and everything. Because, in this movie, there could be.
I'm sure someone, because there's like, I'm so bad at this because there's comics and stuff and there's a whole expanded universes,
yeah.
I'm sure. So someone in the comments can chime in on this, but I just thought I think that it seems like they're scavengers and they're trying to, I don't know, suck up the juices somehow
just walk
with those stilts.
It's not that swampy.
My only question would be like, that's supposed to be what the green was, and I don't know if that's actually survivors from that culture that Furiosa knew, but to me that was the most comic booky part of the movie. Like if you look at the explosions in that part of the movie, they're almost posterized, they're in like layered color. There's just so many things about that part of the movie that stood out as like, this is the section where they really went balls to the wall with this sort of aesthetic. But to me, the other thing that was sort of wild about that whole area was, I mean, to me, the ghillie suit people felt like Boba Fett. Like they were there to look cool and be interesting. Right. And I don't know if there was really more intention than that. And then people were like, holy shit, those dudes are awesome. Show me more of that. But I don't know that I don't feel like there was much more weight to them than that.
And now Disney Plus has announced an entire series about the stilt guys.
Oh, hell yeah. We just follow one of those. They have their own cars, by the way. And they're very
and
weird.
They walk on stilts instead of using tire
The cars
technology.
do not have wheels.
Yeah. It's funny how much this whole thing is almost like adult wacky racers. Like just themed cars chasing each other in a straight line, deploying like gadgets to get at each other.
Pretty sweet.
But with an intense attention to detail. That's why I thought maybe there is a whole story behind the stilt guys, because it does reward close viewing. Like this time I noticed and thought it was really neat that Joe and all his sons breathe through tubes. So it's like they don't even get better water than you. They don't have to breathe the shitty air. Like their whole lives, they breathe recycled oxygen tank air. I think stuff like that is really cool. Like if I were writing a post-apocalyptic wasteland story and I thought of Oh, the evil dictator always breathes through an oxygen tank just to flex that much more. I would be very proud of myself for the day. I'd feel like that is an amazing affectation. Compared to General Grievous, a wheezing robot, I'm like, this is better.
By the way, I just found on the wiki, they're called crowfishers or sky fishermen, unofficially called bog walkers or stilt walkers.
Nice.
And yeah, because that's where the green place used to be. It is not explained what they're there, but they're hunting for crows. And they have kites and fishing nets. But that's all we know about them. There's no backstory, they said.
Somebody should tell them about guns.
I know, right?
Rifles, yeah.
I one of the things we didn't talk about, but you did mention a little bit, Abe, is I feel like capitalism is a pretty big storytelling pin of this story as well. You see people in power that are using resources to amass more power, and then even like taking on almost religious undertones and societal structure to amass more power. And I mean, the War Boys treat Immortan Joe like a god, and all he really has is water. The other thing that this movie to me was really built on was gender roles. The only women in this movie who are not immediately at the disposal of Immortan Joe are people who are down at the bottom of that cliff begging for water, and Furiosa. And I think whatever that eventual Furiosa movie is, I really hope that it explains to me why she is the one female in this entire story who was not at the direct, like, physical
how'd she become
service.
Imperator. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. And she is, I mean, I don't know. It's the eye patch of sci-fi, but it's the mechanical arm. She's just so badass. She really is. Yeah. It's a good ass mechanical arm as mechanical arms go, which I do think are kind of a hack. It's one of the least novel things in the movie is that she has a mechanical arm, but it's a good mechanical arm.
I mean, she's like Master Blaster, you know, like she's one of the lieutenants. It's because she's
now
badass.
Some of the old ones are flooding back to me. Yeah, like the razor blade boomerang. I remember this now. I remember this film. And siphoning the gas, which they do a great. I mean, this is the best. I feel like they've done siphoning gas with their mouths a few times in this franchise, but you can't beat a race where you are. So that's the other thing I appreciated this time that it really does hold up is not just the chase, the car choreography, because of course everyone's like, it's amazing how much they did practically bungee jumping around while cars explode in the desert. That's crazy. But I think equally inventive, and in a way, I always appreciate this, like Kung Fu Panda has this, I would give the same compliment to, is, and all Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan's the master of this. In their fight scenes, there are systems. And I mean, not the car fight scenes, but the fight scenes. Like the idea, I paused it. And I watched this with my mom and stepdad, and I paused it and turned to them, and I'm like, right now, they're fighting chained together, and they both have different targets to deal with, and there's a clear understanding in our heads that he needs this item and he needs this item, and the only way they'll win is to combine the items because the clip from the gun flies away. And I'm like, can you imagine choreographing that fight and balancing all those pieces in your head? That's like Ip Man level. I really appreciate it on this viewing that
screen direction matters, man. I actually have one for you. That this one, because I was reading into it and reading an interview with the cinematographer, and he was like, George Miller would tell me to do this particular thing with the composition of the shot, and he's like, I am not used to it. It's weird. And it's basically it's a little game that you can play when you go home and watch, Fury Road. Everybody, listeners, if during the action scenes, who we're following, or like Michael said, the clip or whatever the game is, like whatever the point of the shot is, or the point of this.
Oh no, the rope is fraying. Oh no, he needs that fire. Exactly. Oh no, whatever.
Or it's just like, oh, it's this person versus this person. It's all that stuff. it's always center punched, like directly in the center. That way you only have to look center. You don't have to look anywhere to scan where you're supposed to look while it quickly cuts. So you never miss who you're following or what you're following. And it's a great way to do chaotic action sequences because it's clear to the viewer who doesn't have to dart around the frame for the first split second. It's simple, and it's something George Miller understands, and he was like, he stuck to it. And I think it's why all of these action sequences, on top of the absolute, virtuosity that we're seeing in terms of like, the explosions and the cars and the set deck and all that stuff. It's just one of the simple, director rules that if you just do that, people are just going to enjoy themselves because they just fall into the movie.
Yeah, it reminded me of the kind of respect we give to John Wick now, and rightly so, but I forgot how good the terrestrial fight scenes are in this as well, and how good the fight math of like, oh, now we're in a race of blowing gas into the intake manifold. Who can do that more efficiently? Like, they set up great systems. I really want to know what that silver spray paint tastes like. Just throwing stuff out.
Is it it gets them high, right?
I would assume it gets you high, yeah. When you die. And I also think you only get assigned one for life, right? Like Nux gets 2, and that's a big deal because he gets another guy. He does it once because he thinks he's going to die, and then he doesn't.
Joe gives him
interesting. And he's born again in that sense. That is kind of cool.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't know, let's talk about looking at the clock. I'm like, okay, you want to talk about some of the stuff where the shine came off over time, watching it a second time? Only insofar as, like, I don't know, I'm looking at my notes, and there was stuff that I thought was, let's say, efficient to the point of showing the seams. Like, when a character says, I guess I'm just looking for hope. And what about you? What are you looking for? Redemption. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just all say our character motivation then. Let's just all explain our deal.
That was one of my notes, was that people say what is going on in this movie so much that it bothers me. Like, people are just describing either what just happened or what is currently happening. It happens like 5 or 6 times in the movies where I was like, I don't need this. I'm watching. Yeah. Everything is like Abe said, everything is center screen. I'm not looking around for what's going on. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll fight for it.
It's an action. Well, it's an action thing, right? They don't care about that, so they just want to get it done ASAP and get back to the chase, which I understand. I also noticed, but thought it was kind of dumb, that the many mothers, which is the culture that run the green place, all their names are V dash something. Like, I get it. It's a female society. I don't know. Just seems on the nose.
A lot of V's, because the little thing, the symbol of Morden Joe is to make a V with your hands. And I was reading that that's because their god is the V8 engine.
Okay. That's cool. Does anyone understand the importance of milk, or did they just think, milk, it's a nutritional liquid, they would hoard it? I don't know. I think
so.
Okay. Because they just...
I don't know.
Yeah, they have a whole cadre of like BBWs whose only job is to produce milk. And the only real world building we get around it is that Rick just tests it and says, moo, as if to approve the milk. Like, this is very moo.
There was another point where where Max asks what is coming out of the thing, and they say that it's milk.
And then he washes the blood off his face with it.
Yes. And I was like, why are they bringing this with them? I understand nothing of what is going on.
I don't get the milk economy. I also feel like in that hot desert sun, the milk on his face would like dry into a film and curdle, but whatever.
You cake up mother's milk. Yeah. Also, like, I mean, we see like 6, 7 mothers, milk mothers, I guess. Mommy milkers.
Yeah, mommy milkers, as the internet has dubbed them.
But
Christ.
The thing is, they're filling vats with this shit.
That's
and
right.
it's
Enough,
and
they're
it's not going
exporting
bad.
it.
And they don't have
shipping
AC cooling. It's not like state-of-the-art technology. It's just in a steel drum. So where are the either there's thousands of mothers and they're just behind a wall somewhere, or just very prolific mothers.
Yeah. Hey, salute to all you milk-giving mothers out there.
Yeah.
Keep the economy rolling. Did anyone ever catch the name of the bullet farm leader? I figured out that the leader of Oil Gas Town is
I did.
the people eater. What's the bullet farm guy who goes
You're
blind?
never gonna guess it, dude.
Bullet.
You know what his name is?
Bullet Man?
The Bullet Farmer.
The bullet farmer. Oh, okay.
Yep. Yep.
Not
They
stretching
fucking
as much as
nailing it.
people eating.
After the whole speech, you were like, names are important.
Yeah.
Exactly, because he's bullshit. He's throwaway. That's what I'm saying, man.
He-
I don't know,
he's
that
a
whole
mini-boss.
scene where he gets his eyes blown off and like Max looks like such a badass and he buys time for everyone else and it seems like maybe he won't come back. The whole payoff for that is like him annihilating or dealing with this dude and then blowing him up. And now to find out that guy's name in the movie is just the bullet farmer.
Yeah,
Really?
he's the Bullet Farmer, baby. I mean, it's a movie where Nathan Jones, the wrestler / son of Immortan Joe, his name in this movie is Rictus Erectus.
Rectus Erectus, baby.
And right before he dies, he lifts the engine up and yells his own name, which is pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty cool.
I also I was weirdly touched in an uncanny valley way when he, it's like, oh, you simple violent giant. Like, when he goes, my baby I had a baby brother and he was perfect. And you're like, it reminds me of those Akewood comics. What's the saddest thing? Liebot. It's an adult man with a learning disability telling a broken egg that they'll be a chicken and they're gonna play someday. Like, it had those vibes.
It's a little girl standing out by the road, and she turns to look back at her house, and it's her parents who put out a little suitcase for her and shut the door.
Yeah. What's the saddest thing?
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, he's so dumb. They're just dumb. They're
Unabashedly
drinking gasoline.
dumb.
You know.
Yeah. But in a way that really shows a lot of care and attention. It reminds me of it. Frankly, it has the sense of whimsy, but also obsession over the world building detail of like a good D&D campaign. It feels like a fun DM is trying hard. And I always appreciate that.
Agreed.
And it does seem like parts of this script, like, so I read a thing earlier that was saying that that George Miller spent 138 days for one shot in this movie. And that blows my mind because there are points where I feel like it's just a DM sitting at a table being like, and then the bullet farm shows up.
And by the way, it was the shot of that naked lady in the cage dancing as bait.
Yeah.
He was just like, let's keep rolling.
Still don't have it. I'm George Miller, 77 years old.
Amazing in a completely depopulated wasteland that's there. You hang out all day naked in a cage hoping someone will come fall for that.
Yeah, that's what a life, you know.
Yeah.
George Miller's world, you old pervert.
Like, who's forging the chastity belts with skulls and vaginal teeth? Because that's not from the old world. And it's crafted. It was like forged in a crucible. Someone is making those. I love thinking about the world.
That's the organic mechanic on his downtime.
Yeah, that's probably
He's just
true.
a leather daddy.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Oh, and this time I noticed they say it's a toss-up, right? It just depends how it hits you. Some stuff seems dumb, some stuff seems cool. Like, it's cool to me that they say, are you a black thumb? And he says, yes. And they go back to repair the engine. And I'm like, okay, so I guess black thumb because you get oil on your... Yeah, it's like being a green thumb, but with engines. And then someone later says, they call bullets the anti-seed. Plant one and watch something die. And I'm like, that's stupid. That's fucking stupid. So it's always a toss-up. It's like a coin flip.
Yeah. I mean, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
One place where the watching it this time didn't really, it felt unearned was Furiosa's immediate turn on figuring out that the green wasn't real. Like, there's no point where she's like, no, it can't. Like, she just immediately accepts it and is like hugely dramatic music as she like crumbles to the ground. And I was like, this is bad comic book bad.
Oh yeah,
this moment.
We all laughed when she fell to her knees and screamed. No, I forgot it was that on the nose.
Yeah, you can't really do that maneuver anymore without citing every time anyone's ever done it, and they're always bad, so you just immediately, your brain goes to, this is silly.
I did like the version we just covered, Darjeeling Limited, as well, and the guy passing out from grief is a good reinvention of that, because he disappears under the water, so you know what I mean. You're like, you don't have to see him fall to his knees because he just falls below the water,
right?
Anyway, yeah, filmmakers listening to this, reinvent the falling to your knee, because that's interesting. Because there are moments of shock and grief powerful enough to cause you to crumble and collapse. Like, it's a valid maneuver in life, but you just can't. It's interesting that you cannot have someone scream no. It sucks so hard whenever you do that without reinventing it.
And I feel like it wouldn't be that bad if there was a point where she like tried to grab for anything or just hold on to denial or, you know, anything that humanized that moment more than just being like, oh no, and then acceptance. Like, there's no human aspect there for me. And that's what really broke me in that moment, is I was just like, oh my God, you just went straight for the cheeseball moment. I will say the thing that bothered me the most, and I know that I will probably get a lot of grief about this, and this is how the way that a Mad Max movie is supposed to end, but the whole beginning of the movie was him like biting the head off a two-headed lizard and being like, survival, that's the only instinct I have left, it's all that I am anymore. And then he's like, I've created this wonderful land of water and plants and I can survive here forever, I'm leaving. That's the point where I was like,
oh, and it's like, what? I guess your thing is being a loner then, isn't it? Not survival.
Yes.
Because it would be very much easier to survive here. You have an inn with Furiosa,
who is now the king of this town. You could fucking
have all the water.
As much moo as you need. The bullet farmer's dead. Like, you could take over the other two civilizations so easily now. Process your trauma, like form new relationships. But that's the problem with on our sister network, Game for Unemployed. No, it's like, well, it's like Dave Bell always says about Batman, right? Like, the Batman, the most recent Batman, would have been almost a perfect Batman movie if it ended with him stopping being Batman. Because the whole arc is him realizing that being Batman causes problems and summons the specter of darkness, but he can't quit. He's got a contract. And I feel
you know why, Mike, though? Because you can't stop Batman.
And you can't stop Mad Max. I do think Miller thinks of Mad Max as a James Bond, or like, you know, especially now that the actor torch has been passed, it's clear that I believe we will have Mad Max movies after George Miller passes, probably. I think it's officially
and I think we'll get
franchise.
Tom Hardy. He was on the hook for 3 Mad Max movies in 2015.
And weirdly enough, you know, he's watching Batman because the person he wanted originally to be Mad Max was Heath Ledger. And then he took the next Batman film.
Yeah, he was definitely in there. But I think Hardy kills it. Like, something about that little thumbs up he gives to Splendid for, like, hey, you didn't die. When, like, she almost gets, like, swiped by a rock when she's on the side of the car.
Yeah.
And then she dies immediately after. But, like, that little thumbs up, it's like, that is an update and better than Mel Gibson. Because it's like, it's more detached, but also shows like a vulnerability and how friendly he is to her. Like, they haven't had an interaction other than him pointing a gun at her, but now that he's on their side, he's like, all right, good job. And just that little bit is like perfectly Max to me. I don't know, I really I thought Tom Hardy did a great job.
Well, and he's very good at being that like stoic, hardly talks, grumpy big brute of a dude. Yeah, that's kind of who Tom Hardy is.
It seems
but I feel like he sold that role really well. I mean, to me, I thought he was the linchpin of the movie, not just plot wise, but acting. Like everyone kind of filled in the gaps around him and gave the character that movie, but he was really the spine of it.
Right. He causes all the change to happen. He's a catalyst, right? Like, so anytime
Well,
you
and Charlize
throw
Theron,
Yeah,
in contrast
exactly.
to him, is so good.
That's why it's a Western, you know, like when you look at these things like, Fistful of Dollars.
It is
or
structured
whatnot,
like a Western, totally. Yeah.
it is
Yep.
truly based on the inner politics of the town, the right hand man
Showdown
of
in
this
a small
guy,
community. Yeah,
the
overthrowing
lieutenant
the
of this
community.
guy, the undertaker of this guy. They all have all these politics that make it complex. You just need someone to light this powder keg. That's all Max really serves as a function. So he's a very simplistic kind of figure. It's Furiosa and Nux who really are the interesting parts of the movie.
I also love that his first line, not counting the VO, the monologue he does about survival, the first line he actually speaks with his mouth on camera is just water. And you're like, yeah, that's the topic of the film. Good maneuver. I like that as a thesis statement.
Yeah.
And I'll say something that I'm sure I'll get crap for online, which is, for me, the way that the House of Cards is built, or the dominoes are laid such that the pressure actually is on Nux and you care about him in that moment. Like, and this is true of Star Wars too, but what I'm getting at is the actual beat when Nux does sacrifice himself and the war rig blows up and there's a huge explosion and Rictus dies and the electric guitar bungees at the camera. For my money, that is as iconic as the Death Star exploding. Like, I really think it's an incredible postcard of we did it, the powder keg is lit, boom,
Very
boom.
cool.
Also reminded me of like The Quick and the Dead when the whole town explodes. It's really like one of the great, we've ramped up this far, here comes the finale fireworks moments of film. It's really well done.
It's there's like 2 or 3 sequences that are just like perfect in terms of the action. One of the big ones is the dust storm. I mean, that thing is incredible.
Oh, I think that's the sequence of the film, or that's like I remember that shot when it gets enveloped in yellow. I remember being in the theater and thinking at that moment, this is like nothing I've ever seen before. Oh my God.
What a glorious day. Yeah. It's it definitely, they knew it was their set piece. And the amount of work that went into it. One of the coolest things that I learned, because I read the interview with the VFX artists that developed that sequence, is that like basically something that isn't typically done, but Miller shows how Miller works, because before he wrote the script, he storyboarded the entire movie, and his storyboards were fantastically detailed. And so he's super prepared.
So it essentially is a comic book movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things so he worked with the way for VFX workflow is he'll work with a concept artist, and he's already shot the plates, and plates are the live action footage. And so he has it to get together, and he's actually got it cut together already. And he's outsourced basic positions and like, all right, there's a twister here, there's a twister there, there's a dust cloud there. In this shot, there, like in the back, there's a lightning strike there. All that stuff has been thought by Miller already, and he puts it in with a concept artist, kind of overlaid on top, like real basic rough in. And so the VFX studio knew to just like, okay, so we just have to place those things in. And it was the sequence that they had to work the longest and the hardest on, even though it's fairly short actually. But all that stuff was done just because George Miller knew exactly what he wanted. And just I'm working in film and just knowing how this huge vehicle moves, it's stuff like that makes this movie great. Because Miller had just he's a genius, and he made his vision very clear to everyone else, and you can't replace that.
Yeah, just thinking about it from the point of view of, I know this isn't like the sexy lens to view it from, but it isn't the craftsmanship, like that he can work with and speak the language of and understand the technical aspects of. every department that was involved in it. You know what I mean? He can talk to the welders. He knows his explosions. He knows how things are going to affect the comp. He knows you have to be such a well-rounded craftsman and technician to make a film like this.
Safety.
Yeah.
It was well known for doing incredible stunts and being safe the whole time. And it's just like, there's no way you can do that.
Yeah.
How the hell did you shoot this? Like it doesn't seem possible in some instances, but it's because it's just meticulously thought out.
Yeah.
He's something else.
Even the fact that which I barely noticed the first time, and in the calm of seeing it the second time was able to go, oh, that is an arc. That he's a universal donor becomes important by the end because he's a blood bag for Charlie. So it checks all the shit. Although I also thought it was funny that one of the many mothers says, she's exsanguinated, drained of all her blood. It's like, thanks for the thesaurus check-in.
Hey, not
Grandma.
everyone's a word, man.
yeah, I know. But so why say exsanguinated? Just say she's drained of all her blood.
Because it sounds hella cool.
She's exsanguinated.
No, you're right.
Drained of all her blood.
Yeah, that's true.
That's another one of those moments where they just said what was obviously happening.
And went one step too far. That's right. Because they're like, look, we're throwing a lot of whirling colors and shit at these people. We need to check in and explain what's happening. I get the impulse, but I just didn't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see where it's simplicity. I mean, we also covered Mad God recently, and that it shares some resemblance to that because Mad God is the Phil Tippett dinosaur supervisor, worked on a film by himself basically, even though it's not true. But I mean, it took him 30 years, and it's just all amazing stop motion. And it's just the script is nothing.
Whatever.
Even the concepts at play, everything. It's just whatever. It's because that's what we're here for. If you're gonna watch a slasher movie, you're not hoping to get a critique on consumerism. Even though it exists in this movie, he tries.
And the only reason I think it's worth discussing is there are films that accomplish all of the above, and it is possible. So I do think it's important to keep that slot open and celebrate it when it truly happens. You don't need that in every film, and I don't think this film prioritized. But I do genuinely think a version where Nux's transition from one worldview to another is explored slightly more and has a little more nuance to it and a little more time spent on it. I could see a version of Mad Max Fury Road where I think it's badass and I wept. I don't weep when I watch this. I just think it's badass. So yeah, I think both can be accomplished. You don't have to. And I don't think George Miller was necessarily trying to. It feels more like Dredd, where it's the action is the point and we checked all the boxes. The plot is good. We just don't dwell on the plot. We just navigate it efficiently till the end.
Yeah. No, that's what I think they set it out to do.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of navigating things efficiently to the end, we're coming up on an hour. Do people have any final thoughts on Mad Max Fury Road? I definitely had fun discussing it.
You go, John.
Guest prerogative.
I just found out a weird fact when I was looking up stuff for this movie before we watched it, which is that Immortan Joe is actually the villain toe cutter from the first Mad Max movie with a bunch of makeup and stuff on, which I thought was pretty cool, and full circle for George Miller. But
in fact, when he's having one of his flashbacks, they cut to a shot of eyes popping out, and that's his death in the previous movie.
Toe Cutter's death, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And I mean, to me, the most fulfilling thing would be if the biggest question that I had coming out of that movie is, why is Furiosa important? I know why she's important to this story, but that's the thing that I wish this movie would have thrown some sort of hint to. And then that's the thing that I probably missed the most, is I was like, you gave me this character and so much promise on this character, and I still don't understand why. What trust did she get from Immortan Joe that nobody else got?
Right. Yeah, I think we're gonna get that with 2024's Furiosa.
Is it a prequel?
It's a prequel. It's an origin story. Yeah, and she will be played by Anya Taylor-Joy.
Oh,
And I believe there's a Chris Hemsworth in it as well.
doing some fucking chess in the desert.
Yeah,
Fucking
with
rips.
he's just gonna be showing his abs.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna be ab man.
Well, the only lingering question I had at the end of this movie was how come when Furiosa hooks Joe's mask and rips his face off, she says, "Remember me?" Of course
That
he does.
one-
It's been like 12 hours since you talked.
Yeah,
He just
you're
saw
like
you.
my main.
You're my
like,
main
person.
employee. Yeah.
I
Yes,
thought there
I
could have been a
do.
way cooler. There could have been you could make a pun on
Mhm.
the mouth guard. You could
Sorry, I deserted you. Something like that.
something. I mean, like I don't
Desert.
like. Give me like a half hour
Face
and I'll figure
off.
something
Yeah,
out.
I'll think of something.
Face off.
What?
Face off is perfect.
Face
no one's
off.
ever
Well,
used that.
there's the point where he says, "That's my child, that's my property," and I really wanted her to turn that back around on him because that's how he sees people, and that was the moment for him to learn that lesson and to bring that back. And she just says, "Remember me."
Yeah, like she didn't even say witness me. That would have been fine. Say witness me.
Yeah,
Witness me would have been great because it could be like witness me murder you. You know, like that's much better.
Yeah, but I do think my favorite is when it's on theme, meaning like the moment where the villain finally gets it and you've wanted it for so long. It should have, I agree with Borba, it should have been something about your child or the nature of property, because my favorite one of all time, and now I'm talking about other movies, so I guess I am done, is Pan's Labyrinth, man. That's the best thing to hear right before the guy who's obsessed with his legacy. And as they're about to shoot him, he goes, "Tell my son." And she goes, "He'll never even know your name," and shoots him in the head. You're like, that is awesome.
Yeah.
The ultimate come up.
I'm not gonna give you the benefit, like any. I'm not. You're not gonna see another second. This is
Yeah, we're
over.
done here.
Yeah, we're done here.
And we are.
Yeah,
We're done
and we
here.
are. We're kind of done here.
Yeah. Well,
All of
man,
us.
this has been on the list since day one. I was worried we wouldn't, because sometimes we have the problem where a movie's just good and we can't talk for it. We're like, I don't know, it's just good. What's to talk about? But this was great. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much, John.
Mhm.
And I'm glad to have you in the guest pool. I hope we can have you back soon.
thank you very much. I would be happy to.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If people do want to follow you and find out what you're up to, you mentioned a Twitter. You want to
Yeah, you
shout
can
it
follow
out?
me at Borbsauce on Twitter and Instagram. I post occasionally, but yeah, most of the time I just keep my head down at work. So I'm working on stories for other people to get credit for.
That's fine. Do that. And yeah, maybe one day when it's not a conflict of interest, we'll have you on our video games pod.
Yeah.
All right, looking forward to it. Abe, say goodnight to the folks.
Witness me get the fuck out of here.
Oh,
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the Small Beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.